All right. Well, I've got 901. We may have a few more that join us as we get moving along here, but in the interest of everyone's time and also having a great subject and good speakers this morning, we won't delay any further. I'm going to introduce our moderator this morning, and then Levi, you can introduce your two guests. But Levi is a director with InterVistas in the airline and airport planning practice. Levi, I guess he's been at this for about 15 years, including air service development at places like Colorado Springs and DFW, and nearly a decade at Southwest Airlines in finance, marketing, and network planning. Levi, thank you for assembling this morning, and I will turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks everyone that's been able to join us today. We have an interesting topic today. As you guys have all known and experienced yourself, the last 2 years in the airline industry has been dynamic, to say the least. Airlines have shifted their networks to address varying and uneven recoveries between business, leisure, and even geographic regions as well. But passenger demand is really starting to come back now, but with the demand coming back, airlines are tackling new issues as well. Many of these issues include staffing issues, high fuel, and much more. We'll talk about it a little bit more here soon. So give a little bit more background on myself. I'm with InterVistas Consulting in the airline and airport planning practice. My group in particular, we focus on air service development. We also help with airline consulting. So we help with airlines around the world solve some of their most complex problems. And we work with MROs to see how their potential fleets would fit in with airlines around the world as well. We also have an expanding regulatory practice as well. So we're helping airlines and airports with varying regulatory issues here up here in DC. I have two great speakers today, John Parker with Southwest Airlines and Keith Hansen with Allegiant. John, I'll let you introduce yourself, and then Keith, and then we'll go ahead and start kicking off to the questions for about 20 minutes, then leave some time for the audience to ask some questions as well.
All right, thanks, Levi. Yeah, my name is John Parker. I'm a senior manager on our capacity planning team here with the network planning department at Southwest Airlines. Started my career as an auditor and CPA in public accounting for 6 years prior to moving to Southwest Airlines almost 12 years ago. I began in the accounting department at Southwest, filing 10Ks and 10Qs before finally seeing the light and taking the opportunity with the commercial side of the business in 2013. Then about 5 years ago, I was on the network strategy team and helped put together the 5-year network plan for the company, which included evaluating new station opportunities. This work ultimately helped lead to the opening of the 18 new stations during the pandemic. Then about a year ago, I was asked to move to capacity planning team where I worked with about 10 planners who helped create the capacity plan for the next 6 to 18 months for Southwest Airlines. Keith?
All right, thanks, Levi and John. A little bit like John, started my career in a different place. Worked for a law firm, and as most of you know, dealing with attorneys is probably not all that fun. Switched plans a little bit, came over to an airline, and the biggest difference is before, when I would call people, they would never answer the phone. Now people enjoy taking my calls because it's, we're typically talking about new service or something along those lines. So it's quite a bit different. But for Allegiant, I oversee our airport affairs department, corporate communications, as well as government affairs, and our DOT work. So it's definitely quite a few things in there. A lot of stuff to keep us busy. We're now in, I lose count, but I think we're in 131 airports now, all domestic across the US. So we've got a pretty wide and deep footprint. And we continue to add new stations where it makes sense. It's been a fun experience watching the growth of this airline, being in the front row seat. When I started, I think we served 35 cities. with about 40 aircraft. And now we're, again, 130-ish cities with, call it 110 aircraft. So, and that's over the last 12 years.
Thanks, Keith. John, I'll start off with a question for you. As part of, kind of sequentially, during the beginning ages of the pandemic and about the first 6 months, Southwest really took a different approach to their network, and where other kind of network carriers were eliminating cities, eliminating routes. You guys added 18 new domestic markets. Can you talk us through what's really unique about these cities? And because many of them were much smaller than traditionally was on the Southwest network.
Yeah, great question, Levi. As we so we're seeing kind of demand recover. Now it's easy to forget how bad it was 2 years ago. Really in the throes of the pandemic, our focus was to add new revenue to the network, both online and offline, really because business demand was gone. So we had plenty of aircraft available to do other missions. Thankfully, again, talking about the team that I previously worked on, we had already set up kind of this 5-year vision for the network. Part of that stream was to look at new station opportunities. So we've kind of done our due diligence and done our work there. So we'd already evaluated all the new stations from a network standpoint. So we were able to move pretty fast. So prior to the pandemic, we only opened up about 1 to 2 new stations per year. So this growth was outside our norm. But the goal really during the pandemic for these new stations was to focus on leisure opportunities, and then really looking at additional opportunities where we could stimulate demand, but not overlap with our current network, really with the ultimate goal of keeping our assets flying, to save jobs and avoid layoffs at Southwest Airlines. Overall, we think this turned out very well, and then we're really excited about the opportunity for the network going forward. And we think these new cities, new stations have really strengthened the network.
Thanks. One of the key items that you hit on there was recovery in the leisure demand area, and your investment in the leisure. Are we still seeing that leisure demand recovering? Because I know a lot of the airports here, they had some parking issues. Leisure parking and business parking are completely different in how people get to the airport. Are we still seeing some pretty strong growth in the leisure demand, or how's the demand environment right now?
Yeah, I mean, leisure demand is still actually really strong. At this point, we actually said in our earnings release a few weeks ago, or conference call, that actually leisure demand at this point in 2022 is actually stronger than it was back in 2019. So I think this is something to continue to watch. I think that'll be interesting to see how it plays out as long-haul international begins to return, and how countries reduce and alleviate their COVID restrictions, including the U.S. So how does that look going forward? And then also, I think, there's this new traveler out there now, this business leisure mix traveler that maybe does both of them on their trip. How does that look like, and how does that change the focus going forward?
Keith, any thoughts on the leisure recovery on your side?
Sure. Would echo a lot of what John said. We have never seen, at least in my years at Allegiant, a demand environment like this. I mean, it is off the charts, which is great. Considering where fuel's at today, you can still be profitable when fuel is spiking like this, when demand is where it's at. We've always been a leisure focused airline. That's the customer that we've always catered to. Is that person traveling to Vegas or Orlando or St. Pete, wherever it happens to be. And I tell you, we feel a little bit, I don't know what the right word is, maybe crowded out now. As we watched over the pandemic, everyone started chasing leisure because, as John said, business just went away. It was non-existent. We didn't necessarily feel that impact, again, because we aren't chasing the business customer, but certainly felt that as airlines added more capacity to the leisure destinations, we could certainly see that. This new customer that John mentioned, this business/leisure customer, certainly is out there. And we started doing some things in the beginning of the pandemic to try to see if we could find that customer. In fact, we offered when all the workplaces shut down, hey, why not come to Vegas for a month? Hotels are dirt cheap, flights are cheap. You got to work from home anyway. Why not come to Vegas and work from a hotel room? And it worked with varying degrees of success in some places. And then lastly, I'll say one of the things that I think we tried to do was during 2020, even a little bit into 2021, as John mentioned, it's really easy to forget how bad things were. I mean, you watched a business, ours in particular, just as an example, go from several $1 million a day in revenue to actually call it about 8 million a day in revenue to 100,000 a day, literally overnight. I mean, just business completely wiped out. And not only are you not taking in new revenue, but revenue that you brought in November and December of 2019 for trips in March and April, you're now giving away. You're pushing it out the door, giving it back to the customer because, of course, you're canceling flights. And so I had never experienced negative revenue before, but watching none come in and then all of the stuff you've taken in go out the door, it was definitely a very unique time in the industry. And we tried as hard as we could to keep flights out for sale and give as long a lead time as possible. Because geez, if you could get it to a 30% load factor, man, that one's worth flying. Do it. So many were hovering around 5-10% or so. Thankfully that's over, but now, of course, as you mentioned, there's a whole new set of challenges that we're facing as we come out of this.
Yeah. So I do want to touch on some of the challenges. One of the ones that you brought up was the fuel environment currently. And for those that haven't been filling up their car and maybe staying at home, which I don't think is any of us, fuel has been quite high. I checked the spot price according to the A4A. Today it was $4.12, which is off its nearly $5 peak, but still nearly double what it was in 2019. 2019 was around $2. How's that impacting your planning, Keith?
Again, for right now, it hasn't been much of an issue. Where I think we're really going to see it, and we tend to be a very peaky airline anyway, where we're gonna throw in a lot of flights in high demand times, March, summer, Thanksgiving and Christmas. We're gonna add a ton of flights. September, we're gonna see our schedules cut by, on some days as much as 90%. For example, we'll have a busy Thursday for us in March is about 600 flights. A busy Thursday in September is about 50 flights. So we'll kind of hedge fuel through capacity just by scaling it up and down and making sure that we're only flying, even especially in those off-peak times, we're only flying flights that make sense. And because our aircraft are low acquisition costs, we can afford to park them in a high fuel environment. It's what we did back in prior fuel spikes when we've seen fuel jump before. We'll park those planes and again only fly when we really have to. So right now, in the high demand environment, fuel isn't that impactful, at least for us, because as you've seen, fares are going up. Customers are willing to pay in this market. In September, are they going to willing to pay? I don't think as much. And so we're going to see a pretty dramatic schedule shift, even for Allegiant. I think it'll be pretty dramatic.
John, I know Southwest has traditionally been hedged. The famous 2008 hedges that Southwest was really known about. How's fuel impacting you guys? Because I know the hedges that you do have they aren't really the same.
That's a good question. Well, first of all, I'd say just from a personal standpoint, I have 4 kids and drive a large vehicle. So I had my first $100 fill up yesterday. So that was a little bit eye-opening for me personally. And you think about getting a smaller car and put my kids in the trunk. Yeah, so as Keith mentioned, demand's been so strong for the summertime that the fuel prices really haven't affected us that much as we're thinking about things. During our recent earnings call, we stated that we are 63% hedged for second quarter. And so we estimate our second quarter fuel price to be in the $3.05 to $3.15 per gallon range. That's roughly 80 cents higher than our first quarter fuel price. But overall, our hedging portfolio is providing meaningful cost mitigation, and the value, I think, is as of the end of first quarter for all of 22 is roughly $1 billion for our hedging portfolio right now. So all that being said, it's something we're aware of and we're tracking right now. But our hedging portfolio has helped offset a large portion of that cost increase. But kind of like Keith said, we'll continue to monitor that and that cost input and adjust our capacity if necessary as we go throughout the year.
Yep. I wanted to move from fuel to staffing. I know a lot of carriers are having issues with staffing, both in ground ops, pilots, in-flight, kind of all the way around. Given the tight labor market, John, are you guys making any adjustments because of the labor shortages?
Yeah, so we're definitely experiencing the staffing challenges. In 2022, we expect to hire over 10,000 new employees. That's net of attrition. At the end of April, we had hired already 6,500 new employees. That's an additional 5,000 net of attrition. So we've already almost halfway to our goal at the end of April. It's a major initiative for Southwest in 2022 and 2023 to get our operation correctly staffed so we can run an efficient and effective airline. We're also taking on a number of different gates in different places. We got 16 gates coming online in Denver, 8 gates coming on in Phoenix, some other ones across the network. So we've got to get staffed, in the air, in the operation, and then on the ground as well. So that's a big thing that we're working on here in 22 and 23.
Keith, any staffing issues on your side?
Yeah, I would echo what John said. We're doing the same hiring, not the same numbers, of course, but probably on a percentage basis, pretty similar to what Southwest is doing, just in terms of trying to get the right amount of staff to cover the flying that we want to do. And those challenges are very real. If you've been to a restaurant or been anywhere recently, you've probably seen signs that say, hey, due to labor shortages, it might take a little longer to get your food, whatever, please be patient. It's certainly no different on the airline side. We've done a number of things from raise wages across the board. Our minimum wage is up substantially from where it was just even a year ago, to pay sign-on bonuses and then retention bonuses to get people who are willing, hey, if you're going to stay 6 months, there's another bonus at 6 months. You stay 12 months, there's another bonus at 12 months. Because we noticed, especially among ground staff, there were a lot of people that were, we called it sign-on shopping, and they were getting a sign-on bonus, staying, for 3 months, which was typically the minimum required, and then bouncing somewhere else. And so we're trying to incentivize people to stay longer to cut back on some of that attrition. And it's, again, with varying degrees of success working in some places, but we certainly have a lot of work to do on the hiring front over the next, call it 6 to 12 months.
Are you experiencing, I know a lot of folks are worried about the pilot shortage. Are you guys experiencing any issues on hiring on the pilot front?
Yes, that's definitely been something that's top of mind for us. I think probably for a number of the carriers that I would put in that Allegiant bucket, the Spirits, Frontiers, even JetBlues and Alaskas, pilots, finding qualified pilots is a challenge in this environment. And, many people, I think myself included, would probably point to the 1,500-hour rule and say, look, that's a real impediment. And not only is it an impediment, it's one that doesn't really seem to have that much of an impact on safety. In fact, I would say it doesn't have any impact on safety based on the data. And I read an article yesterday in Politico. A number of senators were making this sort of false choice that you have to choose between safety and opportunity, and that's certainly not the case. Nobody is arguing to decrease any type of safety standard. What we are saying is that it's been, over 10 plus years since Colgan, 7+ years since the time that the 1,500-hour rule was put into place. We need to constantly evaluate the way we're training, how we're training. There's been new technologies, new simulated developments, virtual reality developments. I'm simply not convinced that the best way to prepare somebody for a rigorous environment, flying, whether it's a 737 at Southwest or a 320 at Allegiant in the Eastern Seaboard over Orlando or Fort Lauderdale or New York, the best way to prepare them is to go get 1,500 hours flying a Cessna in perfect weather in uncongested airspace. That just doesn't make sense. There's a whole new menu of training opportunities and options that we really should be looking at. And by the way, nobody says that, a Lufthansa or a British Airways pilot is unsafe when they're trained without a 1,500-hour rule, and they're flying in the right seat into the US, with 350, 400 hours. So I really think that we've got to look at this and remove some of these obstacles that just don't make sense or really enhance safety to try to beef up that pilot pipeline, because without it, we're going to see a huge hit to the economy and a huge hit on consumers' ability to travel, which of course will also raise fares.
Moving on to a different subject. I know most of the airports here, they're interested in growing service. They'd love to have Allegiant there. They'd love to have Southwest there. John, what's kind of the best approach for many of these cities to approach Southwest and build that business case that their airport is the next best thing that matches the Southwest strategy and should be on the network?
Yeah, so yes, Levi, we see lots of data and access to a lot of internal data and industry data. I think what's helpful for us is what we can't see. So I believe that's even more important coming out of the pandemic. So kind of things that we're looking for are, travel patterns different than they were pre-pandemic. Are you seeing changes in your airport data, more day trippers than before the pandemic? As business travel shifted to Monday, Thursday from Monday, Friday, what are you seeing in terms of migration data? A lot of people moved during the pandemic. So where did they come from? Are they going back home now? These different places. They moved to Florida and now they're going back to New York. And so, what businesses moved to the area during the pandemic? What synergies do they have with other cities on our network? So these are things we really like and find useful and helpful. We're always open to look at new things. So if you have something new you want to share with us, we'll be more than willing to meet with you and listen to that. In terms of approaching us, we're more than happy to meet with airports. Virtually has gotten a lot easier now because of the pandemic, or at a conference or a headquarters meeting potentially. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me or someone else on our team who'd like to schedule a meeting.
Keith, what are you guys looking for when an airport approaches you?
Yeah, I'd certainly say those things that John mentioned are absolutely things that we're gonna take a look at. And as John said, we're looking at data all the time. There's a lot of things that we can see. We get a good beat on things like PDUs and fares. And I think one of the mistakes airports often make is that they'll approach us with that as though we haven't seen it before, but typically we have. So like John said, show us the things that we aren't seeing. What are those unique things about your market that we don't know, being based in Las Vegas? And then I'd say the other thing, if you want to start a conversation with Allegiant about air service, the most important place to begin is on the cost side. Tell us what your costs are up front. That's going to be what we're going to look at first, because we often say, at Allegiant, look, when it comes to pricing and customer demand, we can't really control that. Often the customer is really going to set the price based on how it's booking. But we do have some control on the cost side. So we can't pick the revenue. If we could, this would be really, really easy. A customer is going to sort of determine what the revenue is for the flights. We can help determine what the costs are. Approach us with a cost argument, about why your airport, it makes a lot of sense from that perspective. And that's what gets our attention, I think, more than anything else.
I know with many of the airports on here are smaller airports, and I've heard in the past that the into-plane fuel fee is often, well, not often, but sometimes problematic with some of the FBOs. Can that be an impediment to Allegiant as well?
It absolutely can. And, I tell airports all the time, the only things that we need to fly are a runway and fuel. If we have a runway and fuel, everything else we can get within 90 days, including, TSA and a terminal. That can all happen. But so many airports are willing to give away one of those two key ingredients, right? You never give away your runway, but so many airports are willing to give away their fuel and give it over to an FBO and let them set prices. And oftentimes, especially in small airports, those FBOs are used to collecting a per gallon into plane fee. Sometimes it is pretty exorbitant, especially when you're talking about an aircraft that's going to take several thousand gallons. And so when we run into that, often we'll say, look, we're not going to pay a 15 cent per gallon or 20 cent per gallon into plane. It just doesn't make sense when we're taking this much. That's for the guy who is taking 100 gallons or so. And some FBOs have been really difficult to work with in that regard, and it absolutely can be an impediment or an obstacle to getting new service.
Great. Well, we have a couple questions starting to come in now, so folks, go ahead and start sending them in. But I'll start with the first one. VFR passenger traffic to our market has increased sharply along with leisure travel. Do airlines see VFR component as a temporary shift or a long-term shift, and how does VFR play come into your planning? John, do you want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, I can. I don't know if we segmented out totally separately, looking at all leisure and that together, but looking at leisure coming back and then trying to really overlay that with business travel demand. It's been really interesting, especially for the summer. We were seeing business demand coming back as of March was down only 36% compared to 2019. And so we're trying to balance all those elements and put together a good schedule and run an effective and efficient airline this summer.
One other Southwest question. When does Southwest think the additional gates will be opening? So when will you be utilizing the additional gates in Denver?
Yes, I believe we get 8 this summer. There's a couple more, I believe, that come on like first quarter of 23, and then we get the remaining gates throughout 2023 to be fully up. I think it's by 40 by the end of 2023.
And that'll make Denver by far your largest gate station, won't it?
Yes, it should. Absolutely. Yeah. So it's kind of amazing how much growth it's had in the last 15 years.
Let's see. Another one came in that said, I'm surprised to read recently that Spirit jumped on the ALPA bandwagon, indicating that they do not believe there was a pilot shortage. Seems like this question can be answered quantitatively, fact-based. Can you clarify why there are different messages being sent? I guess that's maybe more targeted to Keith.
Sure, I'm happy to give my opinion, and I'll caveat that, of course, it's just my opinion. I'm not sure exactly what Ted was thinking when he said there's no pilot shortage. My guess is that Ted's got his hands full right now with 2 airlines that are interested in merging with Spirit, and Spirit certainly made its decision on where they want to go. But as you know, these mergers are very complex. They take time, and often one of the things that can really upset and delay a merger is if the union's not on board. And so I think Ted is doing everything he can to try to keep ALPA in a very good place. And that means, maybe not being as vocal on the pilot shortage as he might want to be, because he's trying not to upset a merger opportunity. He certainly doesn't need ALPA going to the Hill or going to the Biden administration, and rejecting this merger or speaking negatively about it. And so I think, again, this is my guess. It's just kind of what I'm seeing. That's probably why. In terms of whether or not there's a pilot shortage, the numbers are in, the data's in. It's not an opinion to say that there's a pilot shortage. There are not enough ATPs coming out to fill the demand that the airlines are seeing right now. We're going to be several thousand short this year, and by call it, I think it was about 10 years, 30,000 short over 10. So that's a very real problem. Whether or not Ted agrees is irrelevant, because it's real.
We don't have any other questions from the audience, but folks keep sending them in. I do have one other one for you, Keith, is if you could discuss your recent code-share and alliance announcement. I think that caught a lot of us off guard a little bit, and how might that actually work?
Yeah, sure. Happy to talk about that. We have, I've been at Allegiant, as I said, for about 12 years, and for 12 years, we've been 2 years away from international service. Again, it's always, oh yeah, in 2 years, in 2 years, in 2 years. And that's been a refrain for a long time. International is not easy when you've never done it before. And, as we started looking at maybe trying to go at it with a partner, we were looking at an airline like Viva, who's had a tremendous amount of success selling their product. Even in transborder service, Viva does quite a bit of it today. But they're not getting that U.S. leisure customer. Their customers who are taking those transborder flights are typically Mexican nationals coming into the U.S. for vacation, or people living in the U.S. going home to see friends and family. It isn't your typical U.S. spring break traveler. And those are the travelers that Allegiant is very good at marketing and selling to. And so Viva just seemed like a natural fit. Given our strengths lie in different areas, we can combine those strengths, and it makes it possible for Allegiant to get, I'd say dip its toe in the international market, but in a much bigger way than it would have been able to do on its own. And so we're really excited about that. We see that as, we're going to use both carriers metal. It's a metal neutral alliance. Our pilots will do some of the flying. They're going to do some of the flying. It gives us a bit of a foothold in congested airports like Cancun, where, without some history of operations, it's pretty difficult to get into. So we're really excited about that. And then the last thing I'll say about it is, the other thing that works really well is there's a seasonality component to both Allegiant and Viva. Our busy season is, of course, March, which for Viva is actually their slowest quarter. Which is a great thing for us. And then September, when we slow down, third quarter, they're actually very busy. So we see there's some opportunities to kind of do some flying for each other in the corresponding peak times for the airline. So we're very excited about it.
That's great. Well, I don't see any additional questions coming in from the audience, so we'll give it just a second. If not, Keith, John, very much appreciate your guys' time and answering the questions that we had today. It is a very interesting time and really dynamic time in the industry. It is good to see the demand starting to come back. Maybe less so if you're looking at the airfares at this time, but it is good to see the airlines hopefully start turning back to a more profitable, more stable environment. So again, congrats on all your guys' work during the pandemic. It's not gone unnoticed, and best of luck going forward.
Yeah, Levi, I'd like to echo that as well. I really appreciate John and Keith, their willingness to speak in detail about their organizations and what some of their challenges are and what you guys are thinking about the industry. Just the openness and the frankness of the conversation is really appreciated and refreshing. And to you, Levi, as well, thank you for pulling this together this morning. I think there was some great detail in there, a few good questions, and a good coffee conversation for sure.
Thank you.
And I'm not seeing anybody else, so we can adjourn a few minutes early. Again, thank you for everyone. Thank you for our moderators and panel, and thank you for everyone. I think we had about 50, almost 50 join this morning. So a really good turnout. Good to virtually see everyone. So everyone have a great day, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.
Care.